Welcome back to Bike Size Bickering. Oh god. My name is Gabe.
I'm Jackson.
You're Jackson.
Scott,
I'm Liam.
not fucking again.
I'm Marina.
Sorry, was that 4 times?
And we're gonna
My
talk
bad.
about something serious this episode. We're gonna talk about addiction.
Oh, I thought we were just going to talk about the definition of something serious, but addiction's okay.
Oh, why so serious? Anyway,
Alright.
You
So-
haven't seen that fucking movie.
I haven't
Shut
seen
the
this.
fuck
You don't reference it.
Yeah, no, we released this a week later, so he has had plenty of time to see the movie. This is not we don't record these.
If I
in bulk
don't
or
fall
anything.
asleep. Anyway, the death clock you're getting.
It's a good movie.
Addiction.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing to start is what would you guys define as addiction? Because I've got my idea. But I'm
Well,
curious what you
Webster's
guys think.
dictionary defines addiction. I don't know. I think anything that like causes anything in unhealthy moderation.
I
Like,
feel
an
like you
unhealthy
can be
amount.
addicted to good things, though.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think you totally can.
Yeah, and that can be unhealthy for you.
Yeah, I know, but you can be if you can be addicted to good things, that defeats the definition of it has to be unhealthy.
That's well, I mean, toaster strudels are good things,
Huh?
and I could be addicted to toaster
Yeah,
strudels, and
but-
if I eat them all the fucking time, then that's an unhealthy
Yeah, but
thing.
is everything you're addicted to unhealthy? Can
I
you
think
not-
that's the definition of addiction,
so
though.
I'll toss.
That's what makes
at
it an
least what
addiction.
I think a good definition is because you have a point. Like some people are addicted to going to the gym or eating really healthy, and some people are addicted to toaster strudels. In my opinion, what an addiction is a method you come back to escape reality in some capacity.
I love that.
I
Right?
actually,
like, that's the
I
one
like
because
that.
I think that really covers
I
the
think
kind
That
of
might be the
motive
actual
I
definition,
think,
too.
I think escape reality is really strong. I think it's more cope with anything. Regular stress or something very intense.
Yeah,
Because
I
escape
think
reality is I don't drink soda pop to escape reality. So to
that
speak.
is fair, but I guess the way I would think of it is like the sensation of that sweet, sweet cola rush
Oh yeah.
might be the.
I may
Thank
or
you,
may
Gabe.
not be addicted to Coca-Cola and Reese's. By the way.
I just can't wait for you to be
I get
quiet
it.
all the other episodes because I didn't realize that till
Yeah.
now. I just looked over.
Whatever.
It doesn't matter. We could probably
Might
hear
as well
you.
go on. I'm probably still too quiet.
Dumb bitch. Anyway,
But not Marina though. She's real loud over there.
Oh my
yeah,
god.
Jesus,
Be louder.
shut up, Marina. God, no. But addiction, like I like that definition.
I think it might not hit all the technical aspects, but I think it gets behind the.
Well, I think addiction's
the
such a
heart of.
such a
the matter.
complicated concept that even like my definition, like while it makes sense, isn't
Yeah, you can always kind of.
is
like,
oversimplification.
You're
Yeah.
still just. It makes sense because you need it to make sense. In order
Yeah,
for it
it's
to
an
be a definition.
it's an oversimplification. But like, it's interesting. I talked to Jack once, and I don't care if he's not fine with me saying this. I'm gonna say it anyway. But Jack, we were once talking. He's like, one of my greatest fears is addiction. Is just the concept of addiction. Because like a great part about addiction is most addicts don't know they're addicts until it's like either too late or like they've done some sort of damage in their life. Like that's a good percentage of addicts. Like not necessarily true for everyone, but
But
like
yeah, usually there's addictions are usually covered, at least in my opinion, by lies and distorted thinking. Like that's why it's. I feel like
bullshit arguments.
Yeah, and rationalizations. I think that the vast majority of addicts would, like, if they all knew exactly what their addiction was costing them, and I think everyone's an addict in some capacity.
Right.
But if
I'm
you-
definitely addicted to TV.
Yeah, but like I think if you could if you had the clarity of mind to know, here is if I continue what I'm doing, here's what I will give up, and if I stop, here's what I will give up. Like if you just knew the actual price you were paying, I think it would be very interesting because I doubt most people would follow through in any addiction if they could see what it was costing them.
I think they will though. That's the whole point of addiction. Is like.
It's an
unhealth-
impulse.
Yeah, it's an impulse. So like you feel the need to do it, and therefore you will sacrifice other things for it. And you might be aware of those things, but you have to feel that base urge. Like it's your emotions versus logic. Like id versus super ego. you know, I really need, like, someone really needs to drink, despite knowing the consequences to it, despite like that they're like, you know, it makes them feel like shit the next morning, they'll still do it anyways, right? And people can still be really aware of those things, but still have to fulfill that addiction, you know.
It's interesting that you bring up id versus super ego because, like,
And I know, like, a lot of that's like bullshit. Like,
well, I don't
psycho-
know.
Well,
I
no,
think-
it-
I
it-
think
kind-
so-
like,
I think
people are, like,
Freud
It's
was
still,
more
like-
right than he was wrong.
Like
That's
it's like for it's like that Freud bullshit where like everyone hates Freud's arguments, but like he still kind of like had a point and a basis for a lot of psychological theories that other people developed.
Right.
So like
yeah, if he
like,
wasn't
the only
a
reason-
genius, people wouldn't hate him.
like like the exactly like the only reason people don't like Freud is because like people improved his stuff later and they don't need his shit now. It's like what like there's a lot of people who don't like a lot of former presidents because like they had to deal with like a bunch of shit show
They don't
and
like Nixon, but they like the EPA. And
yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like,
Like,
well, sorry.
like they don't like Obama, but they like the economy that happened afterwards. Like for all this like dominoes that he set up that eventually knocked down. Like right.
And I think the thing people forget about Freud is he was the first person to have the idea that there's a subconscious, which like that's
Oh, yeah.
pretty like that was a
That's pretty fucking innovative.
massive idea. But I get back to addiction. I think it's interesting, at least in the times where I feel like I've slipped towards addiction in any way. Like I've never been like a real drug addict or anything, but you know, I like YouTube a little more than I should. And
Right.
I've stared at titties a little more than I should, like as all people have. But it's always logic that I feel like is keeping me there, because I think that I think this is why the human power to notice is greater than the human ability to think, is because you can't learn new things by thinking about what you already know. And at least for me,
Right.
I would get in these logical traps of like, oh, well, this isn't as harmful as it feels like it is, or it's fine for this other reason, or just, you know, rationalizing in some capacity. Well, it gets different when it's something like heroin, where there's like a physiological, or at least a much stronger physiological component. I think that's definitely true. But I do think it's not just... I don't think addictions are strictly emotional. I think it takes...
They're physical too.
Well, yeah, physical too, but I think it takes a lot of logic to keep yourself in
Right.
those loops.
I could see that. Well, so like I work in a kitchen, and a lot of kitchen culture, a lot of people smoke, and
Yeah,
so
a lot.
people,
Like, yeah, I've
and,
noticed that.
And
a
as
lot
people
of
smoke, they try to quit smoking a lot, and so everyone will be like, you know, great, you're gonna quit smoking, which is really hard to do when you work in a place where everyone smokes, right? And so usually you'll be like, oh, you're smoking again, and people will be like, yeah, I just decided not to care pretty much. Like they'll act like it's not a big deal. And so I guess that's more kind of like that logical trap of being like, oh, I don't really,
Yeah, and I think the
I
thing...
don't really care right now.
Yeah, and I think a thing people do that sets people up for failure is saying, like, you can do it, it'll be fine, it won't be as hard as you think it is. And I think
Yeah, for sure.
because then they'll hit that point where it gets hard, and they'll either think they're fucking it up, which they aren't, it's just supposed to be hard, or they'll just think, oh, this is going to be harder than I thought it was, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
I think a better approach is a more honest one that's like it takes negative distortion to get into addiction, and I think positive distortion doesn't get you out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think calling an end to that's why people can get addicted to self-help. It's distortion in the other direction. And I think the better approach is to say, like, yeah, you want to quit smoking, dude? It's going to be real fucking hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to suck, and you will slip up. You are almost guaranteed to. But at the end of the day, is it worth it to you? Like, no bullshit. Like, you can say it's not worth it. That's an option.
Yeah.
And
So-
I think that's a better... I found that to be at least a little bit more helpful with at least my things.
I also think that would be helpful too for people just to be like, maybe you should just focus on moderation, not quitting entirely, because like sometimes like you quit, and then people relapse, and that's is more damaging.
And then they
than
feel
the-
guilty
yeah.
about quitting, and they're like, oh, I feel so guilty. God, I want to smoke so bad right now.
Yeah.
But if I smoke, I'll feel more guilty, and you get into this feedback loop.
Yeah.
I think...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing, my family has had an interesting history with addiction. And it's like it mainly spans back like generations way before me. Is like a lot of my great grandparents, a good portion of them were alcoholics,
Mm.
And what sucks is that a lot of them existed during the they lived during the Depression. And so, like, alcohol is super expensive, like, because it was, A, just legalized again, and B, the market crashed and everything.
And no one has a job.
No one has a job.
Yeah.
Alcohol is, like, still one of the most expensive things because it's, like, the hardest thing to make. And so, like, even though, like, a lot of families were poor, like fathers, mothers, doesn't matter, they'd waste money on alcohol. And so, like, I had that was a lot of my great-great-grandparents, and then a lot of my great-grandparents didn't drink at all. And then with both sets of my grandparents, my on my mom's side, they didn't really drink a lot, but they drank in moderation. And then, like, they'll only let themselves drink, like, wine and beer, right? Because it's the lighter options. And my grandparents on my dad's side, like, my grandpa only drinks whiskey. And so it's just interesting, like, how it's, like, devolved. And then, like, my parents are fairly, like, they moderate themselves, but they, like, have their alcohols of choice that they usually have. And, like, sometimes they'll drink too much, but it's whatever. And I probably drink more than my parents do. But, like, because of, like, that family past and, like, all these rules that have followed us, like, along since then, like, because of, like, those people's mistakes, it just interests me and it baffles me, like. And maybe this is more of, like, a legacy argument than an addiction argument, but, like, how that addiction, like, followed the family down, like, so many generations later. Because, like, we're still, like, getting lectures from my grandma about it.
Yeah.
About, like, hey, your great-grandpa was an asshole. Or, like, your great-great-grandpa was an asshole. Like, he was a dick to your great-grandma. And that's why your great-grandma never touched liquor, like, in her life. And, like, it was just interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting how there tends to be this moral backlash against stuff like that, flipping from the debauchery to the puritanical. And it's
Well, it's the same thing. Like, if I had, like, I know people who, like, their grandparents beat their parents, and so their parents will never lay a hand on them, like, whatsoever. Like, won't even give them, like, a quick spank. Like, wouldn't even do that. Like, my dad, like, spanked me once when I was a kid and regretted it because, like, his grandpa and his dad used to beat the shit out of him when he did, like, things wrong. Not that my grandpa and my great-grandpa and my grandpa were, like, bad people. That's just, like, what they did on the farm, and that's how you, worked with kids because, like, not only were they kids, they were workers. And, like, if my dad fucked up, more often than not, it was, like, damaging expensive equipment that might fuck the family over or, like, ruin their sales for the year. So they'll have to, like stinge to have the right food, right? So it's just, like, that's how my grandpa, and, like, how my dad always explains it is just, like, he's like, with my job and, like, the money I have, I am able to provide for my kids, and I am able to teach them in a different way than my dad and my grandpa were able to. And so, like, he's just like, that's what my dad and my grandpa did, is because they didn't have money to, like, get us a computer that I can take away, or, like, they didn't have money to, like, buy me, like, the toys and stuff.
Yeah, it's a different world.
Like, so I could take it away. Like, they just had, like, they had their methods, they had how their dads did it, and so on and so forth. And, like, that's just how farm life is, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the more, like, that's something, I don't even know how we got on this topic, but, like.
You started talking about your grandparents, Gabe.
Yeah. Oh, my
Well,
God.
you got on the whole, like, when people have parents that are addicted, they're either, like,
Oh,
the
like,
same,
they
or
switch.
they're, like, they're the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's rare to see moderate drinkers coming from alcoholics.
Yeah.
It's usually either stone cold sober or alcoholics.
Yeah.
Right. If your parents are dumb cunts, you're a dumb cunt.
Yeah.
No, I'm like amazed at, like, how my family works. Like, my grandpa, I'm gonna tell a really depressing story right now. Just, like,
This is the serious episode, Gabe.
just well, yeah, but so, like I've watched alcoholics and, like, drug addicts, like, change before, and just, like, changes that are amazing, like, due to, like, whatever life experience. And so, like, my grandpa, like he hit his kids occasionally to, like, discipline them. I don't think he'd ever, like, do anything that I'd quantify as abuse, but like I don't actually know the full scale of things, because I know my grandpa actually stopped at a point. Because when my dad was 17, my grandpa died on the table for 5 minutes. And so at that, my grandpa had his near-death experience. He saw the afterlife, like whether it's like the brain's losing oxygen or like actually the afterlife. Believe what you want. I don't care. Because like I had this story with my grandpa, and I've heard his side of the story, which is really funny, because like my grandpa likes to tell things in a lighthearted manner. But my dad's side of the story was, my dad went one day, he smacked me across the face because I disrespected my grandpa, and then the next day he wouldn't lay a hand on me ever again. He never laid a hand on me again. And he, like, the way my dad describes it is the way he hugged him, the way, like, he said, I love you, was all different, and, like, it freaked my uncle out, apparently, because my uncle, like, did something really bad, and he was just like, I'm gonna get my ass kicked tonight, but I expected. My grandpa didn't do anything. He was just like, have you learned your lesson? And, like, had a talk with him instead of, like, doing what he normally did. And so that's, like, the most interesting thing of, like, a personality completely changing to whatever. And this topic started on addiction. But, yeah, some of Gabe's family history for you. So it was really interesting.
How much time we got left?
Oh, we have 35 seconds.
Okay.
Marina, tell your story of addiction.
Addiction? I don't know. Well, like what you guys said, I don't think it has to be both ways. If your entire family's addicted, it either has to be like black or white.
Well, it doesn't have to be, but
It doesn't have to be. Generally, it just ends up like that, I feel. Because I feel a lot of people feel like they don't have an option.
Ask your question.
So what I at least think to be the case, I don't know much about anything really in the grand scheme of things, so it's whatever. But it seems to me that generally people react against, when they see their loved ones who are struggling with alcoholism or anything like that. Either it gets passed down because that's just kind of the norm, or they see that they don't want to end up like that, so they stay as far away from it as they can. That's at least what I've seen. I would imagine that's maybe 30% of people end up alcoholics, 30% end up sober, and 40% are actually just in the middle. That wouldn't surprise me either. But it's just interesting that I think... Assholes.
I hope that picks up on the mic.
I just too. I just like how Jackson's having this serious conversation just from Liam's corner.
That seems like a pretty good place to wrap the episode.
Yeah, let's wrap the episode there. Everyone, on to the next topic.